was forced to marry a cold billionaire, but what happened on their wedding night left her and you shocked. She never expected it. Hi, my beautiful, precious, and deeply cherished family. It's your Mr. Peter. I come to you today not as a content creator, but as someone who loves you deeply. 30,000 hearts, 30,000 souls. I could never have imagined this kind of love. You didn't just support me, you became my family. But my heart is heavy today. Something feels broken, views are down, watch time is falling, and though I may not understand it fully, I feel the distance. Maybe the stories aren't reaching you like they once did. Maybe something is missing. Maybe I am missing something. But even in the middle of all this, I still believe in us. I believe in this family. I believe in love that doesn't vanish when things get quiet. You've carried me with your kindness, and I feel it, even in the silence. So today I simply ask to hold you in a prayer written from my soul, for yours. I pray that peace enters the places you've kept hidden, the parts of your heart that smile on the outside but ache in silence. I pray that love finds you again, slowly, gently, in moments you don't expect. May your heavy thoughts grow lighter and your restless spirit finally rest. May you be reminded, not by noise but by stillness, that you matter, you're seen, and that no matter what you've lost, you have never lost your worth. You are held, you are wanted, you are deeply, endlessly loved. And if these words still mean something to you, please like this video and comment, "We still love you, Mr. Peter." So I know you're still there, and that my heart still has a place in yours. With every ounce of love I have, always your Mr. Peter.
Some devils wear $1,000 suits and arrive precisely at sunset when the dying light makes everything look like it's bleeding. Donna Randall's hands trembled as she mixed crimson paint with burnt umber, trying to capture the exact shade of her family's crumbling dreams on canvas. The foreclosure notice lay crumpled beside her easel, its harsh black letters declaring that the Randall family had exactly 72 hours to vacate the only home she'd ever known. $50 million? That's what they owed Cosenza Industries for the Children's Hospital project that had destroyed their construction company 6 months ago. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:47 p.m., its melodic chime echoing through the half-empty house like a funeral dirge. Donna's father had already sold most of their furniture, leaving behind only the essentials and the art supplies he couldn't bear to take from his daughter. She heard hushed, urgent voices in the foyer, her father's defeated whisper and another voice, deep and controlled, that seemed to command the very air around it. "Donna," her father's voice cracked like breaking glass. "Please come downstairs. There's someone here to see you." She set down her brush, wiping paint-stained fingers on her worn jeans. Through the window, she could see a sleek black Bugatti Chiron parked in their driveway, its million-dollar frame looking obscenely out of place next to their rusty mailbox. Beside it stood 2 men in dark suits who looked like they could break bones with their bare hands. Joseph Cosenza was not what she'd expected. At 38, he possessed the kind of devastating masculine beauty that belonged on magazine covers. Sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, steel-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul, and dark hair perfectly styled despite the evening breeze. His charcoal suit was clearly custom-made, probably costing more than her family's monthly expenses. But it was his stillness that unnerved her most. He stood in their modest living room like a predator assessing prey, every movement calculated and precise. "Miss Randall," his voice was velvet over steel, "I'm Joseph Cosenza." She'd heard the name whispered in business circles and splashed across financial headlines. The pharmaceutical billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing, whose company controlled life-saving medications across 3 continents. Forbes estimated his net worth at $12 billion. Standing in her paint-splattered clothes before this man felt like a sparrow facing an apex predator. I know who you are, she replied, lifting her chin defiantly. You're here to throw us out. Something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. Actually, I'm here to offer you an alternative. Her father shifted nervously beside the window. Donna, Mr. Cosenza has a proposition. Joseph's gaze never left hers. Your family's construction company was hired to build a children's hospital wing for Cosenza Industries. When your business partner embezzled $3 million and vanished, the project collapsed, leaving you liable for the entire $50 million contract failure, plus accumulated interest and legal penalties. Each word hit like a physical blow. The partner, Marcus Webb, had been her father's best friend since college. When he'd vanished with $3 million of project funds, he'd left the Randalls liable for the entire contract failure. However, Joseph continued, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, I'm prepared to forgive the entire debt under certain conditions. Donna's heart hammered against her ribs. What conditions? Marriage. To me. For 2 years. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Her father made a strangled sound, but Donna felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This had to be some kind of joke, some cruel billionaire game she couldn't understand. You're insane, she whispered. I'm practical. Joseph moved closer, and she caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her traitorous body respond despite her fear. I need a wife to access my trust fund. My grandfather's will requires marriage before my 40th birthday, or I lose controlling interest in Cosenza Industries. You need $50 million to save your family from financial ruin. Why me? The question escaped before she could stop it. For the first time, his perfect composure cracked slightly. His eyes drifted to the painting behind her, a work in progress depicting a broken family slowly healing together, their faces emerging from shadow into light. Because you understand brokenness, he said quietly, and perhaps healing. Donna's breath caught. She'd been working on that painting for months, unable to capture exactly what she wanted to express. How had this stranger seen it so clearly? The terms would be clearly defined, Joseph continued, his business mask sliding back into place. A contractual marriage lasting exactly 24 months. You would live in my estate but maintain complete personal autonomy. Separate living quarters. No physical intimacy required unless mutually desired. Your debt would be forgiven immediately, and your family would receive an additional $10 million for inconvenience. $10 million, enough to rebuild their business, pay off their remaining debts, and secure her parents' retirement. All for signing a piece of paper and living in a mansion for 2 years. What do you get out of this besides access to your trust fund? She asked. A wife who won't fall in love with me, he replied with brutal honesty. Someone who understands this is purely business. The casual cruelty of his words stung, but she sensed something deeper beneath them, a wound so old and deep that he'd built his entire life around protecting it. I need time to think. You have 30 seconds. His voice turned arctic. After that, I implement Plan B, which involves bankruptcy proceedings and criminal charges against your father for breach of contract. Her father made a sound like a dying animal. Donna's mind raced through their options. There weren't any. Bankruptcy would destroy what remained of their family's reputation. Her father's health was already failing from the stress. Criminal charges might kill him. But marriage to this beautiful, terrifying stranger. 2 years of her life traded for her family's survival. She looked at her father's hopeful, desperate face, then back at Joseph's impassive expression. In those steel-gray eyes, she glimpsed something that made her decision for her, a loneliness so profound it made her chest ache. I have conditions of my own, she said finally. Joseph's eyebrow arched elegantly. Name them. I continue my art, full studio access, and complete creative freedom. I won't be paraded around as arm candy at your business functions unless I choose to attend. And when the 2 years are up, we walk away clean. No complications, no strings attached. Agreed. He pulled a thick contract from his jacket. My lawyers have already prepared the paperwork. Of course they had. This man planned everything down to the smallest detail. She scanned the document quickly. It was exactly as he'd described, written in legal language but surprisingly fair, almost protective of her interests. Sign here. He produced an expensive pen, its weight substantial in her trembling fingers. As she wrote her name on the marriage contract, sealing her fate to a man she'd known for all of 20 minutes, Joseph spoke again. There's one more thing, Miss Randall. She looked up to find his gray eyes blazing with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. Once you sign that contract, you belong to me for the next 2 years. Not as property, he added quickly, seeing her expression, but as family. I protect what's mine with everything I have. That includes protecting you from anyone who might try to hurt you, including myself. The warning sent chills down her spine, but also something else, a traitorous warmth that suggested maybe, just maybe, this beautiful monster might be more human than he wanted the world to believe. She signed her name with a flourish, sealing their devil's bargain. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Cosenza, Joseph said softly, and for just a moment his mask slipped completely, revealing a man who looked like he'd just been granted a reprieve from his own personal hell. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and Donna wondered if she'd just saved her family or damned herself to something far more dangerous than debt. A marriage that might actually become real. Chapter 2. Bound by paper, separated by walls. Exactly 3 weeks after signing her soul away, Donna stood before a mirror in a $20,000 wedding dress, feeling like a beautifully wrapped sacrifice being prepared for an altar of ice. The Cosenza estate's bridal suite rivaled the size of her childhood home, all polished marble and crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across walls adorned with original Monet paintings. Serafina Vale, her best friend since art school, adjusted the dress's cathedral train while struggling not to cry. "You don't have to do this," Serafina whispered for the 100th time. "We could run. I've got my car outside. We could be in Mexico by tomorrow." "Sarah, stop." Donna caught her friend's hands, squeezing gently. "You know I don't have a choice." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the wedding preparations below. 200 guests seated in the mansion's rose garden, a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon, and enough white roses to bankrupt a small country. The media had dubbed it the wedding of the century, speculating wildly about the mysterious romance between the reclusive pharmaceutical billionaire and the unknown artist who'd captured his heart. If only they knew the truth. "Mrs. Cosenza," a soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Zephyr Blackwood, Joseph's impeccably dressed assistant, peered around the door. "It's time, Mrs. Cosenza." The name felt foreign on her tongue, like trying on clothes that belonged to someone else. In 3 weeks, she'd signed more legal documents than she'd ever seen in her life. Prenups, NDAs, insurance policies that made her worth more dead than alive. Joseph had insisted on complete financial protection for her, even in the event of divorce or his death. The walk down the aisle felt like a death march dressed in designer silk. Every face in the crowd was a stranger. Business associates, pharmaceutical executives, society matrons whose combined net worth could fund small nations. Joseph stood at the altar in a midnight black tuxedo that made him look like sin incarnate, his expression as unreadable as carved stone. But when her eyes met his, something electric passed between them, a jolt of awareness that made her stumble slightly on her 4-inch heels. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and she caught a flicker of something raw in those steel-gray depths before his mask slid back into place. Judge Morrison, an old family friend who'd officiated 3 generations of Cosenza weddings, conducted the ceremony. His traditional words about love and devotion felt like mockery given their circumstances. But when Joseph spoke his vows, his voice carried an undertone that sent shivers down her spine. I, Joseph Octavius Cosenza, take you, Donna Marie Randall, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and honor the commitment we've made to each other. The way he emphasized commitment made it sound less like a business arrangement and more like a sacred oath. When it was her turn, her voice shook slightly. I, Donna Marie Randall, take you, Joseph Octavius Cosenza, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you, respect our agreement, and— She hesitated, then added softly, try to understand the man behind the contract. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or vulnerability quickly hidden. When Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Joseph's hands were surprisingly gentle as he cupped her face for their first kiss. His lips were warm and firm against hers, the contact lasting exactly long enough to satisfy the photographer's expectations, but short enough to maintain the fiction that this was merely business. Except it didn't feel like business when his thumb brushed across her cheekbone, or when his eyes lingered on her lips as if memorizing their shape. The reception was a blur of champagne toasts and congratulations from people whose names she'd never remember. Joseph played the attentive groom perfectly, his hand never leaving the small of her back, his responses to well-wishers smooth and charming. But she noticed how his smile never reached his eyes, how his jaw tensioned whenever someone mentioned children or the future. Such a romantic story, gushed Cordelia Vanderberg, a pharmaceutical heiress whose diamond necklace could probably feed a small village. Joseph told us how you swept him off his feet with your art. We simply must see your work sometime. Donna nearly choked on her champagne. Joseph's version of their meeting was apparently a tale of instant attraction and whirlwind romance. She felt his hand tighten warningly against her back. Donna's incredibly talented, he said smoothly. I'm having a studio built for her at the estate. Art is her passion. The way he said passion made heat curl low in her belly, which was absolutely not supposed to happen. This was a business arrangement. She was not supposed to be affected by her fake husband's devastating smile or the way his tuxedo emphasized his broad shoulders. As the evening wore on, she began to notice the subtle signs of Joseph's discomfort, how he drank sparkling water instead of champagne, how his responses became increasingly clipped when people asked personal questions, how his breathing changed whenever the conversation turned to love or emotions. Finally, mercifully, the reception ended. The last guest departed with air kisses and promises to lunch soon, promises Donna had no intention of keeping, and she found herself alone with her new husband in the mansion's grand foyer. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Joseph loosened his bow tie, the simple gesture somehow more intimate than anything that had happened during their wedding night should be. Your room is in the East Wing, he said quietly. Zephyr will show you the way. You'll find everything you need. Clothes, toiletries, art supplies. If there's anything else you require, just ask the staff. Where will you be? The question slipped out before she could stop it. West Wing. We'll rarely cross paths unless we're both using the common areas. His tone was businesslike, but she caught something else underneath. Was that relief or disappointment? Zephyr appeared as if summoned, leading her through corridors lined with priceless artwork toward what would be her prison for the next 2 years. The East Wing was beautiful in an understated way, warm colors, comfortable furniture, and windows that overlooked the estate's private lake. This is your suite, Zephyr explained, opening double doors to reveal a space larger than her family's entire house. the bedroom, sitting area, and your private bathroom. Mr. Cosenza had the adjoining room converted into an art studio for you. Donna's breath caught as she stepped into the studio. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided perfect northern light. Professional-grade easels stood ready for use, and every art supply imaginable was organized with military precision. It was an artist's dream, clearly designed by someone who understood the creative process intimately. "How did he know?" she whispered. "Mr. Cosenza researches everything thoroughly," Zephyr replied diplomatically. "Will there be anything else tonight, Mrs. Cosenza?" Mrs. Cosenza. She supposed she'd better get used to it. "No, thank you. This is perfect." After Zephyr left, Donna explored her new home with growing amazement. The walk-in closet was filled with designer clothes in her exact size, all with the tags still attached. The bathroom featured a marble-soaking tub that could accommodate 4 people and a shower with enough jets to power a small spacecraft. But it was the bedroom that made her heart race. The king-sized bed was covered in silk sheets that probably cost more than her car, and someone had left a single white rose on her pillow, a gesture that felt both romantic and mocking given their circumstances. She changed out of her wedding dress into silk pajamas that felt sinfully luxurious against her skin, then wandered to the window. The estate's grounds stretched for miles in every direction, lit by discreet landscaping lights that made the gardens look magical. Somewhere in the West Wing, Joseph was probably doing the same thing, staring out at his empire and wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. A soft chime from her phone interrupted her thoughts, a text from an unknown number. "I hope you find everything satisfactory. Sleep well, Mrs. Cosenza. J." She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you for the studio. It's beautiful." His response came almost immediately. "You're welcome. Tomorrow we begin learning to live with our choices." Learning to live with their choices. It sounded ominous and hopeful at the same time. Donna set the phone aside and climbed into the enormous bed, surrounded by luxury that felt more like a gilded cage than a new beginning. But as she drifted towards sleep, she found herself thinking not about the contract, or the money, or the 2 years stretching ahead of her, but about that moment during their vows when Joseph's mask had slipped. For just an instant, she'd glimpsed something vulnerable and yearning in his eyes, something that suggested maybe, just maybe, this beautiful monster was as trapped by their arrangement as she was. Outside her window, the estate's security lights cast long shadows across the grounds, and Donna wondered if Joseph was lying awake too, thinking about the woman who'd just become his wife in name only, and whether 2 years would be long enough to discover who he really was beneath all that careful control. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Foundation. Mysterious gifts began appearing exactly 1 week after their wedding, the first set being Kolinsky sable brushes, so exquisite they belonged in a museum, left silently on her studio easel like offerings to an unknown god. Donna discovered them at dawn when she couldn't sleep and had wandered to her studio to lose herself in paint and canvas. The brushes were arranged with surgical precision next to a note written in Joseph's precise handwriting, for capturing light in dark places. Her fingers traced the perfect balance of each brush, their handles carved from rare wood and tipped with the finest bristles money could buy. The set probably cost more than most people's annual salary, yet something about the gesture felt personal rather than ostentatious, as if he'd chosen each brush specifically for her hands. In the week since their wedding, she'd barely seen her husband except in passing. He left for his office before dawn and returned well after midnight, their paths crossing only in the mansion's common areas, where they exchanged polite nods like elegant strangers sharing a very expensive hotel. But the gifts kept appearing. The second day brought rare pigments from a centuries-old Italian supplier, ultramarine blue ground from lapis lazuli, vermilion red extracted from cinnabar, colors so pure they seemed to glow with their own inner light. The third day, she found first-edition art books stacked on her studio's reading chair, volumes on trauma and healing through creative expression that made her wonder how deeply Joseph had researched her background. By the fourth day, she'd begun looking forward to these mysterious offerings with an anticipation that terrified her. This was supposed to be a business arrangement. She wasn't supposed to care about her fake husband's thoughtfulness or find herself wondering what he was thinking when he selected each gift. The fifth day's present made her hands shake, a leather-bound journal containing photocopied pages from what appeared to be a much older diary. The handwriting was feminine and elegant, dated 40 years ago. As she read, her breath caught in her throat. October 15th, 1984. Joseph painted today, his first attempt with real brushes instead of finger paints. His small hands move so carefully, so precisely. He has inherited my eye for color. When I asked what he was creating, he said, "Happy things, Mama. So the sadness in your eyes goes away." My precious boy, trying to heal the world's pain at only 5 years old. November 3rd, 1984. Found Joseph in his room again, painting by moonlight. He says the colors are clearer at night, that sadness makes better art. I told him art should make people feel joy, but he looked at me with those old eyes and said, "But Mama, how can you paint the light if you don't understand the dark?" The entries continued for months, documenting a sensitive child's growing artistic talent and his mother's increasing desperation. The final entry was dated December 20th, 1984. December 20th, 1984. Tomorrow I must leave. Octavius has made his ultimatum crystal clear. My presence will only bring Joseph more suffering. My brilliant, sensitive son will despise me for this abandonment. But perhaps hatred is easier to bear than the truth. I pray that someday he'll understand love sometimes demands the cruelest sacrifices. I'm leaving my paints and brushes for him. Perhaps they'll speak the words I can never say aloud. Donna closed the journal with tears streaming down her face. Joseph's mother hadn't abandoned him. She'd been forced to leave to protect him. The gifts, the studio, his apparent understanding of her art. Suddenly everything made heartbreaking sense. That evening, for the first time since their wedding, she sought him out. She found Joseph in his home office at nearly midnight, still wearing his suit from whatever business meetings had consumed his day. He was staring at a wall of monitors displaying global pharmaceutical markets, but his unfocused gaze suggested his mind was elsewhere entirely. "Thank you," she said quietly from the doorway. He turned and, in the blue glow of the computer screens, his face looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. For what? The brushes, the paints, the journal. She stepped into the room, noting how his body tensed as she approached. "Your mother's diary." Something flickered across his expression. Pain, maybe, or fear. "She was an artist. I thought you might appreciate her perspective on the creative process. She loved you very much." The words hit him like a physical blow. His jaw clenched, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "She left. She was forced to leave. There's a difference. The result was the same." He turned back to his monitors, dismissing her, but Donna had spent years reading the body language of broken people through her art. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his coffee cup. "Joseph, you should go to bed, Donna. Tomorrow's a busy day." She should have listened, should have retreated to her wing of the mansion and maintained the careful distance they'd established. Instead, she moved closer, drawn by something in his voice that reminded her of wounded animals trying to hide their pain. "When was the last time you slept?" "Sleep is for people without quarterly reports to file." "When was the last time you ate something that wasn't delivered to your office?" Food is fuel. Efficiency matters more than enjoyment. When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy? This time, he turned to face her fully, and the raw honesty in his expression stole her breath. I don't remember. The admission hung between them like a confession. Donna's heart ached for this man who'd been taught to view happiness as weakness, who'd built an empire on the ashes of his childhood and forgotten how to live in the process. "Come with me," she said impulsively. "Where?" "My studio. I want to show you something." Joseph hesitated, clearly torn between curiosity and self-preservation. Finally, he stood, his movements precise despite obvious exhaustion. 5 minutes. Her studio was bathed in moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd been working on a new painting, an abstract piece that captured the feeling of being trapped between light and shadow, hope and despair. But it was the canvas beside it that she wanted him to see. "I started this the night after our wedding," she said softly, stepping aside so he could view the work in progress. It was a portrait, but not a traditional one. She'd painted Joseph as she'd seen him during their vows, the careful mask of control overlaid with glimpses of the vulnerable man beneath. His eyes held depths of pain and longing that most people would never notice, but she'd captured them with heartbreaking accuracy. Joseph stared at the painting for a long moment, his breathing shallow. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Is that how you see me?" "It's how you really are, beneath all the armor." He was standing so close she could smell his cologne, could feel the heat radiating from his body. When he turned toward her, something had shifted in his expression, the careful control cracking to reveal something raw and desperate underneath. "You don't know what you're seeing," he whispered. "What you're painting. I'm not. I can't." "Can't what?" "Feel love. Be the kind of man who deserves—" He cut himself off, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair and destroying its careful arrangement. "Who told you that?" "Experience, facts, the trail of broken relationships and disappointed expectations I've left behind." Donna studied his face in the moonlight, seeing past the beautiful features to the scared child hidden beneath. "Your grandfather." Joseph's entire body went rigid. "We don't discuss him. He's the one who taught you that emotions are weakness, that love is a liability, that you have to choose between success and happiness." Because he was right. The words came out harsh, defensive. "Look at my mother. She loved my father, and it destroyed her. Look at every business partner who's tried to use sentiment against me. Love is a weapon, Donna. In my world, showing weakness gets you killed. This isn't your grandfather's world anymore, isn't it?" He gestured around the opulent studio, the mansion beyond. "All of this exists because I learned his lessons, because I became exactly what he wanted me to become." "What did you want to become?" The question seemed to break something inside him. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, and she saw the lost little boy who'd painted happy things to stop his mother's tears. "An artist," he whispered. "I wanted to paint." The confession hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Without thinking, Donna reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. He didn't pull away, but she felt the tremor that ran through him at the contact. "It's not too late. I haven't touched a brush in 30 years. Muscle memory is longer than that. And besides," she smiled softly, "you've been giving me all the right supplies. It's like you knew exactly what I needed." Joseph looked down at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. "This is dangerous, Donna." "What is?" "This. Whatever's happening between us. Our agreement was—" "I know what our agreement was." She stepped closer, close enough to see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. "But agreements can be modified." For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. His gaze dropped to her lips, and the air between them crackled with electricity. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment like breaking glass. Joseph stepped back, his walls slamming into place with almost audible force. He glanced at the message and his expression turned arctic. "I have to go. Emergency board meeting." At midnight? Global markets don't sleep. He was already moving toward the door, the vulnerable man she'd glimpsed disappearing behind the billionaire's cold efficiency. "Thank you for showing me the painting." "Joseph, wait." But he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of his cologne and the echo of a confession that changed everything. Donna stood alone in her moonlit studio, staring at the portrait that had somehow become a mirror reflecting truths neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Outside, she heard the growl of Joseph's Bugatti starting up, carrying him away from whatever had almost happened between them. But as she touched her lips, she could swear she still felt the ghost of a kiss that never came, and she wondered if the careful walls around Joseph Cosenza's heart might not be as impenetrable as he believed. After all, she'd always been particularly good at finding cracks in seemingly solid foundations. Chapter 4. The Artist Sees the Beast. 3 months after their wedding, Donna stood before the most exclusive art gallery in the city, watching her deepest secrets being hung on walls where the world's elite would dissect them with champagne-dulled critical eyes. The Meridian Gallery was a cathedral of modern art, its soaring white walls and perfect lighting designed to make even amateur sketches look profound. But tonight it showcased something that had never been seen before. A collection of paintings that stripped away the careful facades of power and revealed the broken souls beneath. "Healing the Wounded" by Donna Cosenza, read the elegant placard beside the centerpiece, a massive canvas that dominated the gallery's main wall. The painting showed a figure shrouded in shadow, his face a study in controlled anguish, with fractures of light bleeding through the darkness around him. Anyone who knew Joseph would recognize him instantly, but they'd never seen him like this, vulnerable, haunted, achingly human. "Darling, this is extraordinary work," breathed Helena Morrison, the gallery's director, as she adjusted the lighting for the 100th time. "The emotional depth, the technical skill. It's like you've captured souls on canvas." The entire collection sold out within an hour of the preview announcement. Sold out to people who had no idea they were buying windows into her husband's carefully guarded heart. Donna's stomach twisted with a mixture of pride and terror. What had she done? Mrs. Cosenza? Zephyr appeared at her elbow, impeccably dressed as always, but tension radiating from his usually unflappable demeanor. "Mr. Cosenza has just arrived from Shanghai." Joseph had been in Shanghai for the past 2 weeks, finalizing a merger that would bring life-saving medications to Southeast Asian markets. They'd communicated only through brief, professional text messages about household matters and his travel schedule. She hadn't told him about the exhibition, hadn't warned him that his deepest vulnerabilities were about to be displayed for the entertainment of people who thought suffering was just another form of art. The gallery's main doors opened with a whisper of expensive perfume and hushed conversation as the evening's guests began arriving. Pharmaceutical executives, art collectors, society matrons who attended every significant cultural event in the city, the same crowd that had witnessed their wedding 3 months ago. But Donna's eyes found only one figure in the elegant sea of black tie attire. Joseph stood in the gallery's entrance like an avenging angel carved from marble, his midnight black tuxedo emphasizing the sharp lines of his face and the deadly stillness of his posture. He'd clearly come straight from the airport. There was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of 18-hour flights and jet lag, but his gray eyes were laser-focused as they swept the room. When his gaze found hers across the crowded space, the world seemed to stop. He moved through the crowd like a predator stalking prey, guests unconsciously stepping aside to clear his path. Donna's heart hammered against her ribs as he approached, his expression unreadable but his eyes blazing with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Donna, His voice was perfectly controlled, giving nothing away. I received Helena's invitation while I was in customs. Congratulations on your first exhibition. Joseph, I can explain. Can you? He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something darker. Anger, maybe, or betrayal. Because I'm very curious to hear your explanation for this. He gestured toward the centerpiece painting, and Donna's breath caught. Standing before it now, with Joseph beside her, the resemblance was even more startling. She'd captured not just his physical features, but something deeper. The loneliness that radiated from him, even in crowded rooms. The carefully controlled pain that flickered behind his eyes when he thought no one was watching. I painted what I saw, she said quietly. You painted my soul without permission. The words hit like a slap, but before she could respond, a familiar voice interrupted them. Joseph, darling, you're back. Indira Thorne glided toward them like a predatory swan, her ice blue gown clinging to her model thin frame, and her platinum hair styled in a chignon that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I was just telling everyone about Donna's remarkable talent, such insight into the human condition. Indira was everything Donna wasn't, tall, elegant, born into pharmaceutical royalty. More importantly, she was Joseph's ex-fiancée, the woman who'd broken their engagement 2 years ago, citing irreconcilable differences that tabloids had speculated about for months. Indira. Joseph's voice carried no warmth. I didn't expect to see you here. Oh, I wouldn't miss supporting Joseph's new wife, Indira replied with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Though I must say, darling, she turned to Donna, your work is quite revealing. Tell me, how does one capture such intimate details of a subject, such raw vulnerability? One would almost think you've seen Joseph at his most unguarded moments. The implication hung in the air like poison. Around them, other guests had begun to notice the tension, conversations quieting as curious eyes turned their way. Art requires observation, Donna replied carefully, refusing to be baited. And empathy. How artistic. Indira's laugh was crystalline and cruel. Though I suppose when one marries for money, intimate access comes with the contract. The blood drained from Donna's face. Beside her, Joseph went perfectly still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Careful, Indira. His voice was soft as silk and twice as deadly. You're speaking about my wife. Am I wrong? Indira's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. Everyone knows this marriage is nothing more than a business arrangement. Joseph needed a wife to access his trust fund, and you needed... She looked Donna up and down dismissively. Financial salvation. How wonderfully transactional. You know nothing about our marriage, Joseph said, his hand settling possessively on the small of Donna's back. The touch burned through her dress, sending electricity racing along her spine. Don't I? I know you, Joseph, better than anyone. I know you don't believe in love, don't trust in forever. You told me yourself that emotions are weaknesses you can't afford. Indira stepped closer, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. This little artist may have captured your image on canvas, but I captured your heart years ago, and we both know you're incapable of giving it to anyone else. The words hit their mark with surgical precision. Donna felt Joseph's hand tense against her back, felt the walls slamming back into place around him with almost audible force. If you'll excuse us, Joseph said icily, my wife and I have guests to attend to. But as he began to guide Donna away, Indira delivered her final strike. Tell me, Mrs. Cosenza, she called out with venomous sweetness, what happens when your 2-year contract expires? When Joseph no longer requires a wife to access his trust fund? Do you honestly believe this beautiful fantasy will survive harsh reality? Donna stopped walking. Around them, the gallery had gone silent, the cream of society holding their collective breath as they waited for the drama to unfold. She could feel Joseph's tension, could sense him preparing to extract them from the situation with minimal damage to their public facade. Instead, she turned back to face Indira with a smile that could have melted steel. "You want to know what I see when I paint Joseph?" She gestured toward the centerpiece canvas. "I see a man who's spent so long protecting himself from people like you that he's forgotten what it feels like to be truly seen. I see someone who's convinced himself that love is weakness because the people who claim to love him used it as a weapon." Her voice carried across the silent gallery, every word crystal clear. "But mostly," she continued, moving closer to Indira, "I see a man who's capable of extraordinary tenderness when he thinks no one is watching, who leaves gifts for his wife not because he has to, but because he wants to see her smile, who reads art books until 3 in the morning, trying to understand her passion, who's learning, slowly and carefully, that maybe, just maybe, he deserves to be loved without conditions or contracts." The silence stretched for an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, applause began, first from Helena Morrison, then spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The elite of the city, notorious for their cold calculation, were actually moved by her defense of their marriage. Indira's perfect composure cracked for just a moment, revealing something ugly beneath the polished surface. "How touching. I wonder if you'll feel the same way when you discover exactly what kind of man you've married." Before anyone could respond, she swept from the gallery in a rustle of silk and barely contained fury, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and implied threats. The crowd gradually returned to their conversations, but Donna could feel the weight of curious stares. She just publicly declared her feelings for Joseph in front of 200 witnesses, and she had no idea how he felt about that. "Walk with me," Joseph murmured against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. He led her through the gallery toward a quieter alcove, past paintings that depicted various stages of emotional healing and recovery. When they were finally alone, he turned to face her, and the expression in his gray eyes stole her breath. "Did you mean it?" His voice was rough, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. "Mean what?" "What you said about how you see me." Donna's heart clenched at the uncertainty in his tone. This powerful, brilliant man was asking if she truly saw worth in him beyond his money and status. "Every word," she whispered. Joseph stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands as he reached up to cup her face. "I've been thinking about you," he admitted quietly. "Every day in Shanghai, every meeting, every moment I was supposed to be focused on business. I kept seeing your face, hearing your voice. It's driving me insane. Joseph, I don't know how to do this," he continued, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "I don't know how to be a real husband, how to love someone without destroying them. But God help me. I want to try. With you." The admission hung between them like a promise and a prayer. Around them, the gallery buzzed with conversation and the clink of champagne glasses. But in their private alcove, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. "I want that too," Donna breathed. This time, when he leaned down to kiss her, there was nothing businesslike about it. His lips were desperate against hers, hungry and searching, as if he were trying to memorize the taste of her. She melted into him, her hands fisting in the lapels of his tuxedo as he backed her against the wall. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Take me home," she whispered against his lips. Joseph's eyes darkened with promise. "Mrs. Cosenza, it would be my absolute pleasure." As they made their way toward the gallery's exit, Donna caught sight of their reflection in a darkened window. Joseph's arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder, both of them looking like what they'd pretended to be for months. a couple genuinely in love. But tonight, for the first time, it wasn't pretense. Tonight, the marriage contract had become something infinitely more dangerous and beautiful. A real relationship built on truth, passion, and the terrifying possibility that two broken people might actually be able to heal each other. The only question now was whether their newly discovered happiness could survive the shadows from Joseph's past that Indira had promised would come to light. Chapter 5. Ghosts and Revelations. The first thing Donna noticed when she woke up in Joseph's bed was that he painted in his sleep, his fingers moving against her bare shoulder in precise, deliberate strokes, as if her skin were canvas, and he was creating masterpieces in his dreams. Dawn light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the master bedroom, casting golden shadows across silk sheets that still held the musky scent of their lovemaking. 3 weeks had passed since the gallery exhibition, 3 weeks of Joseph slowly, carefully, letting her into his world. Not just the carefully curated public version, but the private man who read pharmaceutical research papers at breakfast and left coffee for her in the studio when she worked late into the night. Joseph's breathing was deep and even against her neck, his powerful arm anchored around her waist as if he were afraid she might disappear. In sleep, his face had lost its carefully controlled mask, revealing the vulnerability he fought so hard to hide during waking hours. "Good morning, Mrs. Cosenza," he murmured against her throat, his voice rough with sleep and desire. She smiled, turning in his arms to face him. "Good morning, husband." The word still felt new on her tongue, but not foreign anymore. Not since the night he'd carried her from the gallery to his bedroom and made love to her with a desperate tenderness that had left them both shaking. Not since he'd whispered against her skin that he was tired of pretending their marriage was just business. Joseph's lips found hers in a kiss that was soft and exploring, completely different from the controlled passion of their first few encounters. This kiss spoke of familiarity, of lazy Sunday mornings and the luxury of time to simply enjoy each other. "I have meetings all day," he murmured between kisses, "but tonight I thought we could." The sharp chime of the estate's security system cut through their intimate moment like a blade. Joseph's entire body went rigid, his protective instincts kicking in as he reached for his phone. "Sir." Zephyr's voice came through the speaker, tense with barely controlled alarm. "We have a situation. Indira Thorne is at the main gate demanding to see you. She says it's urgent." Joseph's expression turned arctic. "Tell her to make an appointment. She says she has information about Octavius that you need to hear immediately." The name hit Joseph like a physical blow. Donna felt his muscles tense, saw the walls slamming back into place around him with devastating speed. Octavius, his grandfather, the man who'd shaped him into the cold, calculating billionaire the world knew. "Let her in," Joseph said quietly. "Escort her to my office. I'll be down in 10 minutes. After he ended the call, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Joseph was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient mechanical movements that spoke of a man preparing for battle. "Joseph," Donna reached for him, but he stepped away from her touch, not cruelly, but with the careful distance of someone protecting himself from weakness. "This doesn't concern you," he said, his voice returning to the clipped, professional tone she hadn't heard in weeks. "You're my husband. Everything about you concerns me. Not this." He paused in buttoning his shirt, and for a moment she glimpsed something desperate in his gray eyes. "Trust me, Donna, some ghosts are better left buried." 20 minutes later, Donna found herself pacing the east wing like a caged animal, unable to focus on painting or reading or anything that might distract her from the conversation happening in Joseph's office. She'd tried to respect his wishes, tried to stay away, but the look in his eyes when Zephyr mentioned Octavius had terrified her. She'd never seen Joseph truly afraid before. The sound of raised voices from the lower level finally broke her resolve. She slipped out of her suite and made her way toward the main staircase, moving as quietly as possible across marble floors that seemed designed to amplify every footstep. Lying to yourself if you think this little charade can last, Indira's voice carried clearly from the office, sharp with vindictive pleasure. She's going to find out eventually, Joseph, about what really happened to your mother, about the pharmaceutical trials, about what your grandfather made you become. My grandfather is dead. Joseph's voice was deadly quiet. Whatever games you're playing, is he? Indira's laugh was like breaking glass. Because I have photos that suggest otherwise. Security footage from the Cayman Islands, financial records showing regular transfers to an account under his name. Your beloved grandfather didn't die in that car accident 15 years ago, darling. He's been very much alive, pulling strings from his private island, while you built his empire exactly as he intended. The world tilted beneath Donna's feet. Joseph's grandfather was alive? The man who'd allegedly died when Joseph was 23, leaving him to inherit the pharmaceutical company and all its dark secrets? You're lying. But there was uncertainty in Joseph's voice now, a crack in his armor that Indira immediately exploited. Am I? Then explain this. The sound of papers rustling, then Joseph's sharp intake of breath. Where did you get these? I have my sources. The question is, what are you willing to do to keep them from becoming public? Because I can think of several news outlets that would pay handsomely for proof that Joseph Cosenza has been lying about his grandfather's death for over a decade. What do you want? You. Back where you belong. Divorce the little artist, marry me as originally planned, and these photos disappear forever. We'll tell the world it was a trial separation, that you realized your mistake. Your reputation stays intact, your business empire remains secure, and your grandfather's secrets stay buried. And if I refuse, then I expose everything. The photographs, the financial records, the real reason your mother fled. Do you believe your precious wife will still adore you when she discovers you're the heir to a man responsible for thousands of deaths? When she learns that every luxury you've provided came from blood money? Donna's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Blood money? What had Joseph's grandfather done? You have 24 hours to decide, Indira continued. Choose carefully, Joseph. Some secrets are too big to survive exposure. The sound of heels clicking across marble told Donna that Indira was leaving. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering as the blonde woman swept past without noticing her presence. When the front door closed, the mansion fell into suffocating silence. Donna waited several minutes before making her way to Joseph's office. She found him standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the estate's grounds, his shoulders rigid with tension, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "How much did you hear?" he asked without turning around. "Enough." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "Your grandfather is alive." Apparently. His voice was hollow, defeated in a way she'd never heard before. "Joseph, look at me." "I can't." The admission was barely a whisper. "I can't face you knowing what you know now." "What exactly do I know?" He turned then, and the pain in his gray eyes nearly brought her to her knees. "That I'm exactly what Indira said, the son of a monster, a man who's built his entire life on a foundation of lies and blood money. Tell me about the pharmaceutical trials." Joseph's laugh was bitter, self-loathing. "What's to tell? My grandfather used poor communities in developing countries as test subjects for experimental drugs. When the trials went wrong, when people died, he covered it up, bribed officials, falsified reports, destroyed evidence. The fortune that paid for this house, for your art supplies, for our wedding, All of it came from human suffering. Donna's heart clenched, but not with disgust or fear, with understanding. And you've been trying to atone for it ever since. What? The affordable medication programs, the free clinics in underserved communities, the research grants for rare diseases that don't turn a profit. You've been using the pharmaceutical company to undo your grandfather's damage. Joseph stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. You don't understand. I knew. Not everything, but enough. I knew some of our early profits came from questionable sources, and I chose to look the other way because it was easier than facing the truth. You were 23 years old when your grandfather allegedly died. You were grieving and alone and trying to run a billion-dollar company. Of course you made mistakes. Mistakes? His voice cracked. People died, Donna. Children died because of trials my grandfather authorized, and I've spent 15 years profiting from their suffering. She moved toward him then, ignoring his instinctive step backward. And you've spent 15 years trying to save other children. The pediatric cancer research, the vaccine development programs, the global health initiatives, that's not blood money, Joseph. That's redemption. You don't know what I've done, what I'm capable of. I know you. She reached up to cup his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I know you leave me coffee when I work late. I know you read to the children at the hospital wing we fund. I know you cry when you think no one is watching, because you carry the weight of every life your family's company has failed to save. Indira was right about one thing, he whispered, his hands coming up to cover hers. You deserve better than this. Better than me. That's not your choice to make. 24 hours, Donna. That's how long we have before she destroys everything. The company, my reputation, your future. Our future, she corrected firmly. And I'm not going anywhere. You don't understand what exposure would mean. Congressional investigations, criminal charges, civil lawsuits that could drag on for years. They'd paint you as complicit, guilty by association. Then we fight back. With what? She has evidence, photographs, financial records. We have something better, Donna said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. We have the truth. Not your grandfather's truth, but yours. 15 years of documented charitable work, lives saved, communities helped. You're not responsible for what he did, but you are responsible for what you've chosen to do since. Joseph searched her face as if looking for signs of doubt or fear. You really mean that? I mean all of it. The good, the bad, and whatever other ghosts are hiding in your family's closet. For better or worse, remember. That wasn't just contract language, Joseph. That was a promise. For a long moment he simply stared at her, as if trying to memorize her face. Then, with a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I love you, he whispered against her hair. God help me, I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, she whispered back, and felt some of the tension leave his body. They stood there in the golden morning light, holding each other as if they could create a fortress against the world with just the strength of their connection. Outside, the estate's gardens bloomed with life and promise, but inside Joseph's office, they were planning for war. Because if Indira Thorne wanted to destroy their marriage, she was going to have to go through both of them. And Donna was discovering that when it came to protecting the man she loved, she was capable of fighting just as ruthlessly as any billionaire. Chapter 6. The Heart's Surrender. By noon, Joseph had transformed from vulnerable husband back into the calculating billionaire who had built an empire from blood and secrets. Except now, Donna was his partner in both war and love. The mansion's formal dining room had been converted into a war room, its polished mahogany table covered with laptops, legal documents, and photographs that told a story 15 years in the making. Aurelius Kane possessed the sharp blue eyes and commanding presence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and congressional hearings. The supposed business rival was actually an undercover federal investigator who'd spent 3 years infiltrating the pharmaceutical industry's darkest networks. "Gentlemen," Aurelius said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and congressional hearings, "and lady, we have 18 hours to dismantle Indira Thorne's blackmail operation before she goes public." Donna had been shocked when Joseph revealed that his supposed business rival was actually an undercover federal investigator who'd been working for 3 years to expose the pharmaceutical industry's darkest secrets. The hostile takeover attempts, the public feuds, all carefully orchestrated theater designed to get close enough to the real criminals. "The good news," Aurelius continued, pulling up files on his tablet, "is that we've been building a case against Octavius Cosenza for years. The bad news is that some of the evidence implicates companies and individuals we thought were clean." "Including mine," Joseph said quietly. "Including yours. But there's a significant difference between inheriting a corrupt empire and actively participating in its crimes. Your pharmaceutical reforms over the past decade have actually helped our investigation more than you know." Zephyr appeared in the doorway, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "Sir, I've completed the financial audit you requested. The results are complicated." He handed Joseph a thick folder. As her husband scanned the documents, Donna watched his expression shift from resignation to confusion, to something that looked almost like hope. "This can't be right," Joseph murmured. "What is it?" Donna moved to read over his shoulder, her hand settling naturally on his back. "The blood money. It's gone. All of it." Joseph looked up at Zephyr in amazement. "According to this, every dollar generated from the illegal trials was donated to victim compensation funds starting in 2018. I authorized the donations, but I don't remember—" "You were having severe insomnia that year," Zephyr said gently. "Dr. Storm prescribed medication that affected your short-term memory. I took the liberty of executing the donations you'd discussed, but never formally authorized due to your condition." Donna's heart swelled with love and pride. Even in his darkest period, Joseph's conscience had driven him to make things right. "There's more," Aurelius said, pulling up another file. "We've been monitoring Octavius's communications from his Cayman Islands compound. He's not just alive. He's been actively trying to sabotage Joseph's reform efforts. The pharmaceutical pricing scandals, the safety violations at overseas facilities, even some of the hostile takeover attempts against Cosenza Industries. Octavius has been orchestrating them from behind the scenes." "Why?" Donna asked. "If Joseph is his grandson, why would he want to destroy him?" "Because I stopped being useful," Joseph replied, his voice hard with understanding. "When I started implementing ethical practices, when I began undoing his work instead of expanding it, I became a liability instead of an asset." "Which brings us to Indira," Aurelius said grimly. "She's not just an ex-fiancée with hurt feelings. She's been working for Octavius since before your engagement, Joseph. The breakup, the public humiliation, all part of a long-term plan to control you." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Donna saw Joseph's jaw clench, saw the muscle in his temple pulse with barely controlled rage. "She was gathering intelligence," Joseph said slowly, "about my business practices, my psychological weaknesses, your fear of abandonment," Donna finished softly. "That's why she left so publicly, so dramatically. She knew it would reinforce every fear you had about love being a weapon." "And it worked," Joseph admitted. "For 2 years I threw myself into work so completely that I nearly destroyed my health. If not for our marriage contract—" He trailed off, but Donna understood. Their arrangement had forced him to slow down, to remember that there was life beyond pharmaceutical profit margins and quarterly reports. The question now, Aurelius said, is how we handle tonight's deadline. We have enough evidence to arrest both Indira and Octavius, but you need more, Joseph interrupted. You need them to incriminate themselves, to provide evidence that will stick in court. Exactly, which is why I'm proposing something extremely dangerous. Aurelius turned his tablet toward them, revealing a detailed floor plan and surveillance photos. Octavius is flying in tonight for a clandestine meeting with Indira and several other pharmaceutical executives. We believe they're planning to launch a coordinated attack against multiple reform-minded companies, starting with yours. If we can get recordings of that meeting. You want me to wear a wire, Joseph said. I want both of you to wear wires. Donna, your presence would throw them off balance, make them say things they wouldn't reveal to Joseph alone. Absolutely not. Joseph's voice was arctic. I won't put her in danger. Joseph, Donna began, but he cut her off. You don't understand what these people are capable of, what my grandfather is capable of. Then tell me. The room fell silent. Aurelius discreetly busied himself with his files, giving them space for what was clearly going to be a deeply personal conversation. Joseph was quiet for so long that Donna thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. When I was 8, I had a golden retriever named Sunny, my mother's parting gift before she vanished. Octavius tolerated the puppy for exactly 1 week. Then he showed me Sunny's bloodied collar and explained that attachments were vulnerabilities, that anything I loved would become a weapon against me. Donna's blood ran cold. Joseph. He didn't kill the dog, that would have been too obvious. He had it shipped to a research facility where it was used for pharmaceutical testing. When I cried, he made me watch the video footage of the experiments. All of them. Until I stopped crying, stopped reacting, stopped feeling anything at all. The casual cruelty of it took Donna's breath away. What kind of monster did that to a grieving child? I won't let him hurt you, Joseph continued, his hands clenching into fists. I won't give him another weapon to use against me. You already have, Donna said softly. What? Me. He already knows I'm your weakness. Running away won't change that. It'll only prove to him that he still has power over you. Joseph stared at her as if she'd suggested jumping off a cliff. Donna, I'm not a helpless child or a puppy, Joseph. I'm your wife, your partner, and I'm a hell of a lot stronger than you think. She moved closer, placing her hands on his chest. Besides, I have something Octavius has never had to deal with before. What's that? A reason to fight back that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with love. Joseph searched her face, and she could see the war raging behind his gray eyes, the need to protect her battling against his growing understanding that she was right. If we do this, he said finally, we do it together. No splitting up, no heroics, no deviating from the plan. Agreed. And if things go wrong, they won't. If they go wrong, he insisted, you run. You don't look back, you don't try to help me. You just run and let Aurelius handle the rest. Joseph, promise me. His hands came up to frame her face. Promise me that if it comes down to choosing between my life and yours, you choose yours. The intensity in his voice told her this wasn't negotiable. I promise. He kissed her then, deeply and desperately, as if trying to memorize the taste of her lips. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I love you, he whispered against her forehead. Whatever happens tonight, remember that. I love you too. Aurelius cleared his throat diplomatically. If we're doing this, we need to start preparations now. The meeting is scheduled for midnight at the old Meridian warehouse, neutral ground that Octavius chose specifically because it's isolated and easily controlled. As they began planning their strategy, Donna felt a strange calm settle over her. Tonight they would face the monster who had shaped Joseph's childhood and nearly destroyed his capacity for love. Tonight they would either free themselves from 15 years of lies and manipulation or lose everything trying. But for the first time since learning about Octavius's survival, she wasn't afraid, because she'd seen what love could do to Joseph Cosenza, how it had transformed him from a cold, calculating machine into a man capable of extraordinary tenderness and fierce protection. If love could work that kind of miracle on someone as damaged as her husband, then maybe it was strong enough to defeat even the darkest ghosts from his past. Tonight, they would find out just how powerful the heart's surrender could be when it was backed by unshakable determination and the kind of love that burned bright enough to light the way through any darkness. Chapter 7. Into the Lion's Den. At 11:47 p.m., Donna Cosenza adjusted the nearly invisible wire taped beneath her black evening dress and wondered if this would be the last night she'd ever spend as Joseph's wife, or if it would be the first night of their real freedom. The Meridian warehouse loomed against the storm-darkened sky like a monument to industrial decay, its broken windows staring down at them like dead eyes. Joseph's hand found hers in the back seat of their armored Mercedes, his fingers intertwining with hers in a grip that spoke of desperation and determination in equal measure. "Remember," Aurelius's voice crackled through their earpieces from his surveillance van 2 blocks away. "We need them to incriminate themselves on record. Don't push too hard. Let Octavius's ego do the work for us." "Understood," Joseph replied, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from his body. The warehouse's main entrance was guarded by 2 men who looked like they could bench press small cars. One of them, a mountain of muscle with cold eyes, stepped forward as their car approached. "Mr. Cosenza," the guard said, his voice carrying a slight Russian accent. "You're expected, but the woman wasn't part of the arrangement." "My wife goes where I go," Joseph replied with the kind of aristocratic authority that had been bred into him since birth. "If that's a problem, we can discuss it with my grandfather directly." The guard hesitated, then spoke into a radio in rapid Russian. After a moment, he stepped back and waved them through. The warehouse interior was a study in contrasts, industrial decay punctuated by islands of luxury that spoke of serious money and serious power. Expensive Persian rugs covered sections of the concrete floor, crystal chandeliers hung from steel beams, and a mahogany conference table sat in the center of the space like an altar to corporate corruption. And seated at the head of that table, very much alive despite 15 years of supposed death, was Octavius Cosenza. At 78, Octavius remained imposing, tall, silver-haired, radiating the kind of sharp intelligence that had built pharmaceutical empires and destroyed countless lives. His steel-gray eyes, so eerily similar to Joseph's, studied Donna with predatory fascination. "So," Octavius said, his voice carrying the cultured accent of old money and older cruelty, "this is the little artist who thinks she can tame my grandson." Donna felt Joseph's tension spike beside her, but she kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Cosenza, we meet at last." "Indeed we do." Octavius gestured to chairs across from him. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." As they took their seats, Donna noted the other figures in the shadows: Indira, beautiful and venomous in ice-blue silk, and 3 men she didn't recognize but whose expensive suits and predatory expressions marked them as pharmaceutical executives of the worst kind. "I must say," Octavius continued, "I'm impressed by your audacity, my dear. Not many people would dare to interfere in family business the way you have." "I wasn't aware that marriage was interference," Donna replied coolly. Octavius's laugh was like breaking glass. "Marriage? Oh, my dear child, you've been living in a fairy tale. Joseph doesn't love you. He's incapable of love. I made sure of that years ago." "Did you?" She tilted her head as if genuinely curious. Because the man I married seems remarkably capable of tenderness. Perhaps your training wasn't as effective as you thought. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Octavius's eyes narrowed, and she caught a glimpse of the monster who had tortured a grieving 8-year-old boy into emotional submission. Joseph, Octavius said without taking his eyes off Donna. Control your wife. Her tongue is sharper than is healthy. My wife can speak for herself, Joseph replied, his voice carrying quiet steel. Just as she can think for herself, feel for herself, and make her own choices. Novel concepts, I know. Choices. Octavius leaned back in his chair. Yes, let's discuss choices. You've made some interesting ones lately, haven't you? Donating profits to victim compensation funds, implementing ethical oversight committees, refusing to participate in the kind of aggressive market strategies that built this empire. I've made the right choices. Have you? Because from where I sit, you've been systematically destroying everything I've built, everything I sacrificed to give you. You sacrificed nothing, Joseph's voice turned deadly quiet. You destroyed lives for profit and called it business. You murdered my mother. I protected you. Octavius's mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. Your mother was weak, sentimental, a liability that would have destroyed everything, just like this woman will destroy you if you don't handle the situation properly. Donna felt ice flow through her veins at the casual mention of murder, but she forced herself to remain calm. They needed him to keep talking, to incriminate himself beyond any possibility of denial. How exactly did my mother threaten your empire? Joseph asked. She was going to expose the trials, turn evidence over to federal investigators, bring down everything we'd built over some misguided sense of morality. Octavius's voice carried the weight of old anger. I couldn't allow that. So you killed her. I eliminated a threat. There's a difference. And the car accident? Octavius smiled, and the expression was pure evil. Remarkably easy to arrange. A few drops of the right pharmaceutical compound in her morning coffee, a scenic mountain road with treacherous curves. Mother Nature did the rest. Donna's stomach lurched. She could see Joseph fighting to maintain control, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. You made me grieve for you, Joseph said quietly. You faked your own death and let me believe I was alone in the world. I needed you focused, driven by the right motivations. Grief, properly channeled, can be extraordinarily productive. Look what you accomplished in those first few years after my supposed death. Acquisitions, market expansions, profit margins that exceeded even my projections. Built on blood and lies. Built on pragmatism and vision. But then you started getting soft, started listening to your conscience instead of your ledger sheets. The pediatric research programs, the affordable medication initiatives, sentimentality that threatened to bankrupt us all. Indira finally spoke, her voice silk over poison. Which is why we're here tonight, darling, to discuss how we're going to fix this little problem you've created. Fix it how? Donna asked, though she suspected she already knew. Simple, Octavius replied. Joseph divorces you, marries Indira as originally planned, and returns to running Cosenza Industries the way it was meant to be run. Profitable, efficient, unconstrained by misguided ethics. And if he refuses, then we release evidence showing that Joseph has been knowingly profiting from illegal pharmaceutical trials for 15 years. Congressional investigations, criminal charges, civil lawsuits that will destroy not just him, but everyone associated with him. Octavius's eyes fixed on Donna with predatory satisfaction, including wives who might be considered complicit. You're forgetting something, Joseph said quietly. What's that? I'm not the same broken child you manipulated into submission. I've learned a few things over the years. including how to fight back. Joseph reached into his jacket, and for a heart-stopping moment, Donna thought he was going for a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a thick manila envelope and slid it across the table. "What is this?" Octavius asked, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. 15 years of evidence, financial records, communication logs, security footage from your Cayman Islands compound, every illegal transaction, every covered-up death, every bribe you've paid to keep your secrets buried. The color drained from Octavius's face. "That's impossible. You destroyed your copies, but I've been building my own files since I was 25. Insurance, you might say, against the day you decided to crawl out from whatever rock you'd been hiding under." "You're bluffing." Page 47. The Kerensky trial in Romania, 2019. 63 children died from your experimental meningitis vaccine, and you paid $8 million to have the results buried. Octavius's hands trembled as he rifled through the documents. His face went ashen as he realized the scope of what Joseph had compiled. "This proves nothing," Indira said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Actually, it proves everything," Joseph replied. "Murder, conspiracy, racketeering, human trafficking for medical experimentation, enough to put all of you away for multiple life sentences." "You can't use this," Octavius snarled. "It would implicate you as well. Which is why I've already turned copies over to federal authorities, along with documentation of my cooperation in their investigation and evidence of my attempts to compensate victims and reform company practices." Donna felt a surge of pride and love, so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. Joseph had been planning this for years, building a case against his own grandfather while simultaneously working to atone for the family's crimes. "You've been working with them all along," Indira breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Not all along, but for the past 3 years, yes. Ever since I learned my grandfather was still alive and pulling strings from behind the scenes." Octavius stood abruptly, his chair scraping against concrete. "You ungrateful little—" "Hands where I can see them." Aurelius's voice echoed through the warehouse as federal agents poured in from multiple entrances, weapons drawn and vests marked with DEA and FBI logos. The next few minutes were chaos, shouted commands, the metallic click of handcuffs, Indira's furious protests as she was read her rights. But through it all, Joseph's hand never left Donna's, anchoring her to the moment and to him. As Octavius was led away in shackles, he turned back to fix his grandson with a stare full of venom and defeat. "This isn't over," he called out. "You think you've won, but you've just signed your own death warrant. There are others, Joseph. Others who won't be as patient as I've been." "Let them come," Joseph replied, his voice carrying the kind of quiet strength that had nothing to do with money or power, and everything to do with love and moral certainty. "I'm not the same man you tried to create. I have something to fight for now." As the warehouse emptied of federal agents and their prisoners, Joseph and Donna found themselves alone in the echoing space. The weight of 15 years of lies and manipulation had been lifted from their shoulders, but they both knew the victory had come at a cost. "It's over," Donna whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "This part is over," Joseph corrected, pulling her into his arms. But Octavius was right about one thing. There will be others. His business partners, his political connections, people who profited from his operations and won't appreciate losing their golden goose. "Then we'll face them together." "Together," he agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of freedom and new beginnings. Outside, dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. They had survived their first real test as a married couple, had proven that their love was strong enough to withstand even the darkest family secrets. But as they walked hand in hand toward their car, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows, or the way he spoke quietly into a satellite phone before disappearing into the early morning darkness. Some battles were won, but the war was far from over. Chapter 8. Blood and Betrayal. 6 weeks after Octavius's arrest, Donna discovered that sometimes the most devastating betrayals come not from enemies, but from the people you've learned to trust with your deepest secrets. The morning sickness hit her like a freight train at exactly 7:23 a.m., sending her racing from the breakfast table to the nearest bathroom with a violence that left her gasping and shaking. Joseph was beside her in an instant, his warm hands gathering her hair back as she retched into the marble toilet, his voice a soothing murmur of comfort and concern. "It's okay, love. I've got you. Just breathe." When the wave passed, she slumped against him, her body trembling with exhaustion. "I think I'm dying," she whispered. "You're not dying," he said softly, though she could hear the worry in his voice. "But I think we should call Dr. Martinez." Dr. Elena Martinez had been their family physician for the past month, carefully recommended by Aurelius after their previous doctor proved to have suspicious connections to Octavius's criminal network. She appeared warm and professional, quickly becoming one of the few people they trusted in their carefully guarded world. "Mrs. Cosenza," Dr. Martinez said 2 hours later, her kind face glowing with barely contained excitement. "I have some wonderful news. You're pregnant. About 8 weeks along, I'd estimate." The words hit like lightning, illuminating a future neither of them had dared to dream about. Joseph's hand found Donna's automatically, their fingers intertwining as the magnitude of the revelation settled over them. "Pregnant," Donna whispered. "We're having a baby." "You're having a baby," Dr. Martinez confirmed with a warm smile. "A perfectly healthy baby, from what I can see on the ultrasound. Would you like to hear the heartbeat?" The sound that filled the examination room was like a miracle. Fast, strong, rhythmic proof that something beautiful was growing between them. Joseph's eyes filled with tears as he stared at the grainy black and white image on the monitor, his free hand trembling as he reached toward the screen. "That's our child," he breathed, wonder and terror warring in his voice. "That's our child," Donna confirmed, squeezing his hand. They left the medical center in a daze of happiness and disbelief, their hands never separating as Joseph's driver navigated through the city's mid-morning traffic. They had so much to discuss: nursery preparations, security concerns, how to protect their child from the enemies who were still out there plotting revenge. But as their armored Mercedes pulled through the gates of the Cosenza estate, something felt wrong. "Where's security?" Joseph murmured, noting the absence of the guards who should have been stationed at the main entrance. Their unease deepened as they approached the mansion. The front door stood slightly ajar, moving gently in the morning breeze like a mouth whispering secrets. Joseph's driver, Marcus, a former Navy SEAL who'd been with them for 3 years, had gone rigid with alertness. "Stay in the car," Marcus ordered, his hand moving toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Something's not right. But before he could reach his gun, the rear windows exploded inward in a shower of reinforced glass and tranquilizer darts. Marcus slumped forward over the steering wheel as armed figures in tactical gear surrounded the vehicle. "Joseph!" Donna screamed as hands reached through the shattered windows, dragging her from the car even as similar figures hauled her husband from the opposite side. The last thing she saw before the dart in her neck took effect was Joseph fighting like a man possessed, his voice roaring her name with desperate fury as consciousness slipped away. When she woke, she was in hell. The warehouse was different from the one where they'd confronted Octavius, older, more decrepit, with rusted chains hanging from the ceiling and dark stains on the concrete floor that spoke of violence and death. She was zip-tied to a metal chair, her wrists already chafing from her struggles to break free. Across the room, Joseph hung from those ceiling chains, his face bloodied but his gray eyes blazing with undiminished fury. He was conscious, alert, and focused entirely on her. "Donna," he called out, relief flooding his voice. "Thank God. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," she lied, though her head was pounding and her stomach churned with a combination of lingering nausea and terror for their unborn child. "How touching," a familiar voice purred from the shadows. The happy couple, reunited at last. Dr. Elena Martinez stepped into the light, but she was nothing like the warm, caring physician who had delivered their wonderful news just hours earlier. This woman was cold, calculating, with dead eyes that belonged to someone who had seen too much suffering and enjoyed it too much. "You," Joseph breathed, understanding and fury blazing in his voice. "You've been working for them all along." "Not for them, darling. With them. I've been Octavius's inside person for 5 years, keeping track of his enemies and their weaknesses." She smiled, and the expression was pure evil. "Did you really think your grandfather would go to prison quietly? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences for your betrayal?" "The pregnancy test," Donna said, pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "You drugged us during the appointment." "Very good. The ultrasound gel contained a mild paralytic agent. Nothing harmful to the baby, of course. We need both of you alive and healthy for what comes next." 2 more figures emerged from the shadows, and Donna's blood turned to ice. Damien Cross, Joseph's younger brother, who had supposedly died in a car accident 10 years ago, stepped forward with a smile that was pure malevolence. Behind Damien emerged a woman Donna didn't recognize. Tall, elegant, possessing the kind of cold beauty that belonged in fashion magazines or funeral parlors. "Hello, brother," Damien said, his voice carrying the same cultured accent as Joseph's, but twisted with years of resentment and rage. "Miss me?" Joseph stared at his brother as if seeing a ghost, which, in a way, he was. "They told me you were dead." "They told you what you needed to hear, just like they told you Octavius was dead, just like they've been telling you lies your entire miserable life." Damien moved closer, close enough that Joseph could see the family resemblance that had been hidden by plastic surgery and 15 years of careful planning. "Did you really think you were the only heir, the only one with a claim to the Cosenza empire? You've been alive all this time. Alive and watching you systematically destroy everything our grandfather built. The charitable programs, the ethical oversight committees, the victim compensation funds. You've been giving away billions that rightfully belong to the family. Those programs saved lives. They weakened us." Damien's composure cracked, revealing the madness underneath. "Every dollar you donated, every reform you implemented, every moral stance you took made us vulnerable to exactly this kind of situation. If you'd stayed strong, stayed focused on profit over sentiment, Octavius would never have been arrested." The woman stepped forward, and when she spoke, her accent was crisp, British, with the kind of authority that came from generations of inherited power. "Allow me to introduce myself," she said with mock politeness. "Lady Victoria Ashworth, representing certain pharmaceutical interests that have been severely damaged by your husband's recent ethical awakening." Donna recognized the name. Ashworth Pharmaceuticals was one of the oldest drug companies in Europe, with a reputation for cutting-edge research and complete disregard for human rights. If they were involved, this went far beyond family revenge. "What do you want?" Joseph asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. "Simple," Victoria replied. "You're going to sign over controlling interest in Cosenza Industries to your brother, dissolve all charitable programs and victim compensation funds, and return the company to its previous operational model." "And if I refuse?" Dr. Martinez pulled out a syringe filled with something that glowed faintly green in the warehouse's dim lighting. Then we inject your pregnant wife with a compound that will cause immediate miscarriage followed by massive internal bleeding. She'll die slowly, in agony, while you watch helplessly. The casual cruelty of it stole Donna's breath. These people weren't just criminals. They were monsters who would murder an unborn child to make a point. "You're insane," Joseph said, but Donna could hear the fear creeping into his voice. "We're practical," Damien corrected. "You have 1 hour to decide. Sign the papers or watch your wife and child die in front of you." As her captors retreated to give them time to consider their impossible choice, Donna met Joseph's eyes across the warehouse. In their gray depths, she saw love, rage, and a desperation that broke her heart. But she also saw something else, a cold, calculating intelligence that reminded her exactly who she'd married. Joseph Cosenza might have learned to love, but he was still the man who had built a billion-dollar empire through strategy and careful planning. And despite their current circumstances, she had the strangest feeling that their captors had just made a fatal mistake in underestimating what her husband was capable of when the people he loved were threatened. The question was whether his plans would be enough to save them both, or if this would be the last hour they'd ever spend together. Outside the warehouse, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and Donna found herself praying to whatever gods protected broken families and impossible love stories, begging them for just one more miracle in a life that had already been blessed with more than its share. Chapter 9. Storms Before Dawn. What Joseph's captors didn't know was that a man who had survived Octavius Cosenza's cruelty since childhood had learned to plan for every contingency, including the possibility that the people he trusted most might betray him. 57 minutes into their hour of contemplation, Donna watched her husband work magic with nothing but his voice and the kind of psychological manipulation that had been burned into him from birth. He'd been talking to their guards, casual conversation that sounded like desperate small talk, but was actually something far more calculated. "Marcus was former military, wasn't he?" Joseph was saying to the youngest guard, a nervous-looking kid who couldn't be more than 22. "Navy SEAL, I think. Probably had family in the service." "Yeah, so?" the guard replied, but Donna could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Marcus served in the Navy SEALs," Joseph continued conversationally. "He has a 6-year-old daughter with cerebral palsy, medical expenses that run $30,000 monthly. Loyalty like that doesn't come from paychecks alone. It comes from helping families in crisis." "What's your point?" "My point is that Marcus isn't as unconscious as you think he is. And right about now, he's probably wondering why the tracking devices in our phones went dark at exactly the same time our security detail disappeared." The guard's hand moved instinctively toward his radio, and that's when everything went to hell. The warehouse's main entrance exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and twisted metal as Marcus's armored Mercedes crashed through like an avenging angel. Behind it came federal vehicles, black SUVs with DEA and FBI markings that surrounded the building with military precision. "Down! Everyone down!" Aurelius Kane's voice boomed through a megaphone as tactical teams poured through every entrance. In the chaos that followed, Donna saw Joseph break free from his chains with movements that spoke of hidden lockpicks and careful preparation. He'd been working on his restraints the entire time, using their captors' psychological games as cover for his own escape preparations. "Donna!" he shouted, racing toward her as gunfire erupted around them. But Damien was faster. Joseph's brother intercepted him halfway across the warehouse, and the two men crashed into each other with bone-jarring force. They fought like animals. No technique, no artistry, just pure savage fury fueled by 15 years of lies and resentment. "You destroyed everything," Damien screamed as they rolled across broken concrete, each trying to gain the advantage. "Everything grandfather built, everything our family stood for." Our family stood for murder. Joseph managed to pin his brother's gun hand, preventing him from getting a clear shot. For exploitation and cruelty and... Dr. Martinez appeared behind Donna's chair with the glowing syringe, her face twisted with rage and desperation. If I can't have the company, I'll at least have the satisfaction of watching you suffer. She raised the needle toward Donna's neck, and time seemed to slow to a crawl. Donna could see Joseph's eyes widen with terror, could hear his voice roaring her name with desperate fury. She closed her eyes and braced for the pain. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. When Donna opened her eyes, Dr. Martinez was crumpling to the ground, the syringe spinning away across the concrete floor. Behind her stood Evangeline Storm, Joseph's ex-fiancée and therapist, holding a smoking pistol with steady hands. "Nobody hurts my patients," Evangeline said calmly, as if she shot people every day instead of helping them work through their emotional trauma. "Evangeline?" Joseph stared at her in shock, momentarily distracted enough for Damien to break free and scramble for his weapon. "I've been working with Aurelius for 6 months," she explained quickly, moving to cut Donna's restraints. "Ever since we realized how deep this conspiracy went. Are you hurt?" "The baby is fine. I switched out Martinez's syringe yesterday when we realized she was compromised. That's just saline solution." Relief flooded through Donna with such intensity that she nearly collapsed. Their child was safe. Whatever else happened, their baby was going to be okay. But the danger wasn't over. Lady Victoria Ashworth had produced a pistol from somewhere and was advancing on them with the kind of cold precision that suggested military training. Around them, the warehouse echoed with gunfire as federal agents battled the remaining guards in a deadly game of cat and mouse. "Drop your weapons," Victoria commanded, her gun trained on Donna's chest. "All of you, or Mrs. Cosenza dies right here, right now." Evangeline hesitated, torn between compliance and the knowledge that surrendering would likely mean death for all of them. "Do it," Joseph said quietly, his hands raised in surrender. "She means what she says." As Evangeline lowered her weapon, Joseph caught Donna's eyes and mouthed 3 words that sent chills down her spine. "Trust me. Run." Before she could ask what he meant, he was moving, not toward Victoria or away from her, but directly toward the warehouse's electrical panel. Understanding hit Donna like lightning, and she threw herself backward off her chair, just as Joseph ripped the main power cables from the wall. The warehouse plunged into absolute darkness. In the chaos that followed, screaming, gunfire, the crash of people running into invisible obstacles, Donna felt strong hands grab her arms and pull her toward what she hoped was safety. "This way," Aurelius's voice in her ear, barely audible over the mayhem. "Joseph's already outside." They stumbled through the darkness, guided by emergency lighting from the federal vehicles outside. As they burst through a side exit, Donna's eyes adjusted enough to see Joseph standing beside an ambulance, his face bloodied but his gray eyes blazing with relief as he saw her. "Donna!" He caught her as she stumbled, his arms wrapping around her with desperate intensity. "Thank God. Are you—" "I'm okay. We're okay." She pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with sweat and fear. "The baby's fine. I know. Evangeline told me about switching the syringe." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd been crying. "It's over, love. They're all in custody." "All of them?" "Damien, Victoria, the guards, everyone except Dr. Martinez." His expression darkened. "She didn't make it." Donna felt a complex mix of emotions at that news, relief that the threat was gone, but sadness that it had come to violence. "Evangeline is fine. Aurelius is debriefing her now." Joseph's voice carried a note of gratitude and something that might have been closure. "I owe her my life. Our lives." "You owe her a thank you card," Donna corrected with exhausted humor. "Maybe a nice fruit basket." That startled a laugh out of him, the first genuine laughter she'd heard from him in hours. "A fruit basket. I'll remember that." As EMTs checked them both for injuries and federal agents processed the crime scene, Donna found herself thinking about how much their lives had changed in the space of a single day. This morning, they'd been a married couple planning for their first child. Tonight, they were survivors of a conspiracy that had almost cost them everything. "Joseph," she said as they sat in the back of the ambulance, his arm around her shoulders and her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "Yes. Next time someone offers to be our family doctor, maybe we should do a more thorough background check." "Next time," he said solemnly, "we're only trusting people who've already taken bullets for us." "That's a very short list." "I prefer it that way." As they drove toward the hospital for a thorough examination, both for Donna's pregnancy and to ensure they hadn't been poisoned or injured during their captivity, she reflected on the strange turn their lives had taken. 6 months ago, she'd been an unknown artist struggling to save her family from bankruptcy. Now she was the pregnant wife of a billionaire pharmaceutical executive, having survived kidnapping, betrayal, and multiple murder attempts. "Do you think it's over?" she asked quietly. "Really, over this time?" Joseph was quiet for a long moment, his hand coming to rest over hers on her stomach. "Octavius is in federal prison. Damien and Victoria will join him there. The pharmaceutical conspiracy that's been operating for decades is finally exposed." "That's not what I asked." "I know." He sighed, and she could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "There will always be enemies, Donna. People who want what we have, who resent what we've done, who think they can profit from our suffering. But the big threats, the existential ones, yes, I think those are over." "Good," she said firmly, "because I'm too tired for any more dramatic rescues. From now on, our biggest crisis should be choosing nursery colors." "What colors are you thinking?" She considered this seriously. "Something hopeful. Something that says this child is going to grow up surrounded by love and safety and all the second chances we never had." "That sounds perfect," Joseph murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Absolutely perfect." Outside the ambulance windows, the city lights blurred past in streaks of gold and white, carrying them toward a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. They'd survived the worst their enemies could throw at them, and they'd done it together. Now all that remained was the beautiful, terrifying, wonderful work of building a family and learning to live happily ever after. Chapter 10. Miracles times 3. 7.5 months later, Donna Cosenza stood before the bathroom mirror at 3:17 a.m., watching her husband's reflection as he slept peacefully in their bed, and wondered how much longer she could hide the fact that their lives were about to change in ways they'd never imagined. The pregnancy had been filled with surprises, from the persistent morning sickness to Joseph's endearing habit of reading pharmaceutical research about fetal development to her expanding belly. But the greatest shock came at their 20-week ultrasound, when Dr. Sarah Chen, extensively vetted, with security clearances rivaling cabinet members, had grown unusually quiet while examining the monitor. "Is everything okay?" Joseph had asked, his hand gripping Donna's with the kind of tension that spoke of too many recent traumas. "Everything is... well, it's remarkable, actually." Dr. Chen had turned the monitor toward them with the expression of wonder and professional amazement. "You're having triplets, 2 boys and a girl, all developing perfectly." The silence that followed was deafening. "Triplets," Joseph had repeated, as if the word were in a foreign language. "3 babies," Donna had whispered, staring at the ultrasound screen where 3 distinct heartbeats pulsed like tiny miracles. 3 babies, Joseph had confirmed, and then promptly fainted. Now, as Donna watched the man who had survived childhood trauma, corporate warfare, and multiple assassination attempts sleep with the peaceful expression of someone who'd found genuine happiness, she smiled at the memory. He'd recovered quickly from his fainting spell, of course, and had spent the subsequent months preparing for their expanding family with the kind of obsessive attention to detail that had made him a billionaire. The nursery had been transformed into something that looked like a combination of an art gallery and a high-tech command center. 3 cribs crafted by Italian artisans sat beneath original paintings Donna had created during her pregnancy, soft, dreamy works that captured the wonder and terror of bringing new life into a world that could be both beautiful and dangerous. Joseph had insisted on security systems that could detect a mosquito landing on the windowsill, while Donna had fought for the simple comfort of handmade quilts and the rocking chair that had belonged to her grandmother. But tonight, as another contraction gripped her swollen belly with breathtaking intensity, Donna realized that all their careful planning might not matter, because these babies had apparently inherited their father's impatience and were arriving 3 weeks ahead of schedule, in the middle of a thunderstorm that had knocked out power to half the city. "Joseph," she called softly, gripping the bathroom counter as another wave of pain rolled through her. He was awake instantly, those gray eyes alert and focused, despite having been deep in sleep moments before. "What's wrong?" I think it's time." The next hour was a blur of controlled chaos. Joseph calling Dr. Chen, Zephyr coordinating with the hospital, Marcus preparing the armored vehicles for emergency transport through storm-lashed streets. But as they reached the mansion's main foyer, ready to leave for the hospital, Donna doubled over with a contraction so intense it stole her breath. "We're not going to make it," Dr. Chen said grimly, having arrived within 20 minutes of Joseph's call. She'd examined Donna quickly and efficiently, her expression growing more concerned by the moment. "The babies are coming now. All of them." "What do you mean, now?" Joseph's voice carried the edge of panic he'd been fighting all evening. "I mean, Mrs. Cosenza is in active labor with the first baby crowning. We need to prepare for delivery here, immediately." The estate's master bedroom was transformed into an impromptu delivery room with startling efficiency. Joseph's security team cleared the space while household staff gathered towels, hot water, and medical supplies from the first aid stations Joseph had insisted on installing throughout the mansion. Dr. Chen worked with calm professionalism, but Donna could see the concern in her eyes. "Joseph," Dr. Chen said quietly as another contraction gripped Donna, "I need you to understand that triplet deliveries can be complicated even in a hospital setting. Here, with limited equipment and no surgical backup—" "Just tell me what you need me to do," Joseph interrupted, his voice steady despite the terror Donna could see in his eyes. What followed were the longest and most intense hours of Donna's life. The first baby, one of the boys, arrived with surprising ease, his cries filling the room like a declaration of war against the storm raging outside. Joseph caught him with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he stared at the tiny, perfect human they'd created together. "He's beautiful," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Absolutely beautiful." But there was no time to savor the moment. The second baby, their daughter, decided to be difficult, turning herself into a position that made delivery dangerous for both her and Donna. Dr. Chen worked with calm determination, but Donna could see sweat beading on the doctor's forehead despite the bedroom's cool temperature. "I can't," Donna gasped, exhaustion overwhelming her as another contraction hit. She'd been in labor for 6 hours now, and her strength was fading fast. "Yes, you can," Joseph said firmly, settling beside her on the bed with their firstborn son cradled in one arm. "You're the strongest person I know, Donna. You survived my grandfather, survived Damien and Victoria, survived me at my worst. You can do this. I'm scared. I know, love. I'm terrified too. But look. He held their son where she could see him, this tiny miracle with Joseph's dark hair and what looked like her stubborn chin. Look what we've already accomplished. 2 more to go, and then our family is complete. The second baby, their daughter, finally decided to cooperate, sliding into the world with an indignant wail that suggested she was deeply offended by the entire birthing process. She was smaller than her brother, but no less perfect, with delicate features and lungs that could apparently wake the dead. 2 down, Dr. Chen said with exhausted relief. 1 to go. But the third baby, their second son, had apparently decided that dramatic entrances ran in the family. He was breech, positioned incorrectly, and showing signs of distress that had Dr. Chen moving with increasing urgency. "What's wrong?" Joseph asked, reading the doctor's expression with the kind of perception that had made him a master at reading corporate negotiations. "The cord is wrapped around his neck. I need to deliver him quickly but carefully." Dr. Chen's voice was professionally calm, but Donna could hear the underlying tension. "Mrs. Cosenza, I need you to push when I tell you to, and stop immediately when I say stop. This has to be precise." The next 10 minutes were the longest of Donna's life. She could feel Joseph's tension radiating through his careful touch, could see Dr. Chen working with the kind of focused intensity that left no room for error. Outside, the storm seemed to be reaching its peak, thunder shaking the windows as if the very heavens were holding their breath. "Now," Dr. Chen commanded, "push hard." Donna bore down with everything she had left, feeling as though she were trying to push her very soul out of her body. There was a moment of resistance, then sudden relief as their second son slipped free, silent, blue, terrifyingly still. "Is he?" Joseph's voice broke. Dr. Chen was already working, suctioning the baby's airway, stimulating his chest, performing the kind of medical magic that separated life from death. For an eternity that lasted perhaps 30 seconds, the only sounds in the room were the storm outside and the gentle cries of their first 2 children. Then, a gasp, a cough, and finally a wail of protest that was the most beautiful sound Donna had ever heard. "There we go, Doctor," Chen said with obvious relief, wrapping the baby in a warm towel. He just needed a moment to figure out how to breathe. Completely normal for triplets, especially with cord complications. Joseph was crying openly now as he accepted their third child, his arms somehow managing to hold all 3 babies, despite their determined efforts to wriggle free. Donna watched through exhausted, tear-blurred eyes as her husband, this man who had been taught from childhood that emotions were weakness, completely fell apart with joy. "They're perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with wonder. "All 3 of them. Absolutely perfect." "What are we going to name them?" Donna asked, reaching out to touch each tiny hand with fingertips that trembled with exhaustion and overwhelming love. They'd discussed names for months but had never quite settled on anything that felt right. Now, looking at these 3 tiny miracles who had chosen to arrive during the storm, inspiration struck with surprising clarity. "Storm," she said softly, touching their daughter's cheek. "Because she arrived with the thunder and lightning, and because storms can be beautiful and terrible and absolutely unstoppable." "Storm Cosenza," Joseph repeated, testing the name. "I like it. And the boys?" "Hope," Donna said, looking at their firstborn son who had arrived so easily, as if he couldn't wait to join their family. "Because he's proof that beautiful things can come from the darkest circumstances." "And our youngest?" Joseph asked, gazing down at the baby who had given them such a scare. "Phoenix," Donna said without hesitation, "because he fought his way back from the edge just like his father did." "Hope, Storm, and Phoenix Cosenza," Joseph said slowly, as if savoring each name. Our children. As dawn painted the storm-washed world in golden hues, the new family of 5 settled into peaceful quiet that follows life-altering moments. Dr. Chen confirmed all 3 babies were healthy and strong, that Donna's recovery would proceed smoothly, and that she'd witnessed one of the most beautiful deliveries in her 30-year career. But for Donna, exhausted and overwhelmed and more happy than she'd ever thought possible, the most beautiful sight was Joseph singing quietly to their children. Old lullabies in a voice rough with emotion, lullabies his mother had probably sung to him before the world taught him that love was dangerous. "I love you," she whispered as sleep began to claim her. "I love you too," he replied, his voice soft with wonder and contentment. "All 4 of you, more than I ever thought it was possible to love anything." Outside their bedroom windows, the sun continued its rise over a world that had been washed clean by the storm. The Cosenza Empire would continue, but it would be different now, guided by love instead of fear, by hope instead of cruelty, by the knowledge that sometimes the most beautiful families are born from the most unlikely circumstances. And in the nursery down the hall, 3 tiny heartbeats pulsed with the steady rhythm of new life, new hope, and the kind of love that could transform even the coldest billionaire into a man who sang lullabies in the early morning light.